As more people start playing the fastest growing sport in the US, they are sure to get tips on how to play better from coaches and other players. But unfortunately, not all advice is good advice. Today we're discussing 3 of the most common pickleball tips that we regularly hear that simply are not true. See if you've heard any of these before. In today's video, we're going to talk about 3 common pickleball bogus tips that can destroy your game. Now let's get right into the video. Bogus tip 1. You can't step into the non-volley zone until the ball has bounce. The non-volley zone is the place on the court where there is the most confusion. The most common pickleball tip that isn't true is that you can't step into the NVZ until the ball has bounce. You can actually step into the NVZ, but you can't volley the ball if any part of your body is touching inside the NVZ. It may be a small difference in words, which is probably why people are confused, but it's an important one. The rule itself says 9.E. The only time a player can't go into the non-volley zone is when that player is volleying the ball. USA Pickleball Rulebook. This means that you can stand in the NVC at any time as long as you don't volley the ball, and there's no set amount of time you can stay there. If you spend a lot of time in this zone, it's not a good idea from a strategic point of view because your opponent can just hit the ball at you and have to volley or let go past you. But if you want to follow the rules, you can stand anywhere inside the NVZ. How can this false idea or bad advice hurt you? If you're playing against someone who can dink the ball well, which means you can land the ball just inside your NVC, you might hesitate to move because you're afraid of stepping into the NVC. Instead, you should step into the NVC early when you know the ball will be hard to reach so you have time to make a good shot. Then you can just step back out of the NVC and get ready for the next volley. In any sport, but especially pickleball, hesitating is a good way to play badly. Now, before we move ahead or talk about more game-changing pickleball tips, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel so that we can keep bringing more informative pickleball content to you. Your little contribution means a lot for us. Bogus tip 2. Run to the non-volley zone as fast as you can. To be fair, about half of this tip is true. This is because it's true on one side, but not on the other. For example, if you are on the return side and your partner is serving, you have to let the ball bounce before you return the serve. You should move quickly to the non-volley zone after you hit the return. Now let's imagine being the serving team. Your team serves and the ball comes back to them. By rule, you have to let the ball bounce, which means your team is probably still back at the baseline. If you or your partner run up to the NVC right after making the third shot, you could put yourself in a position to get slammed by your opponent. Pickleball, the third shot is so important because of this. When do you need to run to the NVC? Depends on which side of the ball you're on or what kind of third shot you are or your partner made. If it's a good third shot drop, your opponent shouldn't be able to slam the ball at you, and you should move quickly to the NVC. If it's a drive or a bad third shot, you should wait and see what your opponent does. Bogus tip 3. Run around a weak backhand. The last common pickleball tip that isn't true is that you should run around and hit with your forehand to avoid your weak backhand. We all have areas where we aren't as strong. Some people use their forehand, but most use their backhand. One way to deal with a weakness is to stay away from it, but this isn't a good idea. And there are many bad things about it. One reason it's bad is that when you run around the shot, you move yourself out of position for the shot. If you're not in the right spot, you have to hit the ball in an awkward way, which usually leads to a bad shot or a mishit. Next, it's a bad because you'll need to know how to use a backhand at some point during a match. You just don't have time to run around the ball all the time. You might as well work on your weakness now so you can get better at it in the future. Don't try to hide your flaws, instead work on improving them. Now let's talk about 5 areas that we think will improve your pickleball game the fastest. Number 5, stop taking such a big swing on your return. Players below the 4 and 5 levels tend to hit their returns with big swings, just like they hit their drives. Not taking into account the fact that these 2 shots are very difficult and have very different goals. The main goal of the return shot should be to hit the ball far. If you hit it deep, you'll have time to move forward. Your opponent might not be able to hit a good third shot. Big swings can sometimes work, but they also make you make a lot of mistakes that you don't need to be made. Number 4, stop attacking the balls when you're in a forward position. Players also often make the mistake of putting themselves in bad attacking positions. Most sports make sense when you try to score as soon as possible. When you play pickleball, you have to think of it like chess. You can't try to win right away or you'll lose a lot of pieces. Learn how to set up the kill shot instead. If you try to go for broke on every shot, you'll make a lot of mistakes and give your opponents chances to steal the point. Number 3, stop hiding your weaknesses. There will always be something you think you're not very good at. During games, players tend to start avoiding shots like the backswing, the volley, and the third shot drop. We think this is a terrible idea. The problem is that they don't force yourself to try these shots. You'll never get better, and your opponent will be able to guess what you'll do, making it harder for you to win matches. It's important to use your strengths as much as possible. It's also important to try to improve your weaknesses over time. You can't be a well-rounded player if you never work on the parts of your game that need improvement. Number 2, refine your third shot strategy. One of the most important parts of becoming a good pickleball player is getting good at the third shot. So many players always hit the same third shot, which is a big mistake. At lower levels, it seems like more players use a drive on their third shot, while at higher levels, more players use a drop. The difference is that at the higher levels, these players know when to switch things up, and they do it almost every time. Your strategy for the third shot could change based on who you're playing and where you are. You should try a few different shots against your opponent early in the game to find out who they are and how they like to play. Try some drops and drives to see what they do. Do you notice that only use one side, or they have always tried to backhand every shot? Take note of their habits early on so you can look for signs what might try that shot again and again as the game goes on. Keep track of what your opponent does can help you plan your own moves and score more points. Number 1, take better advantage of higher balls while you're at the net. Let's say you've set up your opponent perfectly and put yourself in a place where they can hit a high ball while you're at the net. What do you do? Well, unfortunately, what a lot of players do instead of going for the put away is give the ball right back. Pick a ball. If the ball is above your shoulder, you should hit it with a good amount of speed and put it where it will be hardest for your opponent to return it. You don't want to slam it so hard that you'll lose control, but you also don't want your opponent to have a good chance to hit your back. If your opponents are back, not in the kitchen line, you should go as deep as you can so they don't have a chance. Trying to hit through them is one of the worst shots you can make because they can easily hit it right back. If the ball isn't above your shoulder, you can try a shot called the roll, in which you spin the ball and aim it at your opponent's feet. So what are your thoughts about these bogus tips in pickleball? Tell us in the comments.